Welcome to the Profit Answer Man, Colin Sanburg. It's great to have you join us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Can you share a little bit about yourself and your business?
Sure. Yeah, so I've got a couple different businesses, but entrepreneurship's really all I've ever done in my life. I realized in my early 20s that I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and started pursuing it. Had a family member who was in entrepreneurship at the time, and so I went to work there, thinking I'd be there for a year, and then I'd go off and do my own thing. And 23 years later, I still own that business, and so, I kind of went the multiple entrepreneur or multiple business route, and eventually started the new business I'm working on now.
What were some of the industries you were in?
So the first one's a manufacturing company. It's actually, we manufacture airport conveyors. So like what you claim your bag off of, we make those. As well as, when you check your bag and all the things happening behind the scenes at the airport as well.
Do you have any pull with the airport on design?
No, not at all. In fact, the airports, I got in the industry right after 9/11. And so it's been like this, kind of mess. They've been rolling with the punches at first on security. And then, so yeah, unfortunately, no. By the time they hire us, these things, the die is cast.
I wish they would put a line about 4 or 5 feet back from the baggage carousel that says, stand behind this line until it's your turn to get your bag. Because people all crowd around. It's like, dude, my bags are heavy and they're solid. And I'm going to pick it up and I'm going to whip it off this thing. So you better stand back.
Yeah, for your own safety, get back.
For your own safety, get back.
Yeah, it's funny. My other businesses, I've got another one that's a cabinet manufacturer. So we do kitchen and bathroom cabinets. And no one ever complains about their cabinets to me, but I hear about bags that get lost or their experience at the baggage claim every time.
Well, I think it's the nature of travel these days. It's not as fun as it used to be.
No doubt.
No doubt. So what's your new business that you're currently involved in?
So my new business, we've got a fractional CFO service. And I say service because, from my experience, I was always a financially minded entrepreneur. And so as I hired people to run different parts of my business, it was always hiring out the sales and the operations, and then ultimately hired people to run the companies themselves. And I ended up in this fractional CFO kind of role outside the company advising it. And what I found is that, a lot of times in those types of scenarios, you're throwing all these big ideas the finance person has. And the reality of what it takes to implement change in the business is much more boots on the ground, frontline type of work. And so we created a service kind of built around what I had done for my own companies, but ultimately trying to help companies get better. I mean, I know it's a lot of what you do.
Do you find most businesses are focused on the finances?
Sorry to laugh, but I'm pretty sure that's a tell of my answer. No, they are not. Not at all.
Do you know why?
I would say that I always say that in math class, even back in high school, so somebody would say there's a pop quiz or, hey, we're doing a test today. And 95% of the room kind of shrank into their seat. 5% perked up. Now, I say that because we try and hire that 5%. I don't need them to have a big, finance background or be this amazing bookkeeper, but I need that to be true of them. And I think that most business owners, almost exclusively, fit in the 95% who wanted no part of that math test.
And that makes sense, that you don't do what you don't enjoy, right? And there's nothing wrong with not being a math geek. I get it. But if it's not your thing and it's not natural to you, then you're going to ignore it, which means if you're a business owner, you better get somebody to sit in that seat and to run it. What are some of the biggest issues that you see business owners have with either their cash flow or their profitability?
So I think, a lot of small businesses start out and the entrepreneur, let's say it's a solopreneur type of setup, they're living off of closed deals and how much money I have in the bank. And that's about it. And the reality is those aren't even speaking the same language, much less are they, a way you can actually engage a team and run a real company. And so I think the future version of that looks like what we see a lot, which is companies that are running their revenue in their books is structured on cash basis. So it's like I sent that invoice when I knew the invoice would get paid. And so therefore, it's time to pay me. And so you have these kind of spikes of what appears to be revenue in their books because it's just cash basis. But a lot of their expenses are accrual. They're paying payroll as it's happening. Their rent has to be paid as it's happening. And so you end up in this scenario where, again, you have two different languages in their books. And then they come in and we tell them like, hey, we can help you make more money. But the first thing we have to do is get the matching principle working on our side here so that we can actually see were you profitable in March or not. And, we've got a graphic that we show people to paint the picture. And what's really wild, it's a real company's data. Obviously, we don't say what company it was. But the month that looks the best is the month they ran out of cash. And so it looks the best because they had a big invoice that was able to go out and their costs looked like they were really low. Now, in reality, that invoice didn't get paid yet. And so they run out of cash. And so it's like, go make good decisions based on this chart. Good luck. And unfortunately, that's the mode they live in day out.
Yeah, it is. And even if they've got what we call matching of the expenses to the revenue, depending on how good their bookkeepers are, how timely it is, and when it's getting entered and how it's getting entered, can also affect what you actually see. And at least what I find for most companies, their books usually aren't done any time before the middle of the following month.
Yep.
Which means if you're trying to run your business off your books, you don't have any clarity of what's actually going on, which is why I think most business owners look at their bank account. Cash, no cash, sell, collect,
Yep.
and they do that on a daily basis, unfortunately. And I think for a lot of small businesses, they don't need to have that daily bookkeeping, but they do need to have systems and processes that at least it does get done and they can predict what's coming going forward, or at least have that prediction system. Because let's face it, in a situation like you're talking about, what sales are already lined up, right?
Yep.
When you're probably going to get paid. What your rent is. What your weekly payroll is. You start laying all of that out. You can start to predict your cash flow and you can start to see what's going to happen going forward.
Yeah. And to your point, I think most entrepreneurs start with that kind of rattling around in their brain. And at some point, the data becomes overwhelming and they can no longer effectively layer all the different things on top and figure out what it really means 3 weeks from now. And then likewise, it's totally unsustainable to try and bring a team along to do that, right? You might be able to do that because you're living and dying with this business and you're going to bed thinking about it and waking up thinking about it. But your employees who you've hired to do a job, they're not going to be at that level. And they're not going to have access to the information the same way that you do. So yeah, I think I always say it's trying to drive a car without a windshield, right? You're looking out of the mirror, side mirrors in the rearview mirror, good luck not running into something. And that's basically looking back at 45-day-old numbers and saying, I'm going to use this to make decisions and run a business.
Not only that, I would almost bet those employees are part of the 95% that shrank in the math class. which
Yeah.
means if they are not financially savvy, there's no way they're going to be financially savvy for you. And most businesses encourage people to spend money, not save money, nor do they
Mm.
reward efficiency and profit to their people.
Yeah. Well, and I think to your point, you have this kind of vicious cycle going on where let's say that you're not a financially focused business owner. You're then attracting other people in the business who are probably not any more numbers focused than you are. They're not getting good information. They're probably not privy to all the books and the details. Even if they are, you don't know how to explain it to them. We're not building day-to-day metrics around productivity and how they drive the financials. And so then the circle just keeps going around and around. And to your point, that's a recipe for inevitably you're going to hit the wall somewhere, right? It's going to be pretty ugly.
That it is. And I find when you can sit down and come up with your financial goals, then you can reverse engineer the business to be able to meet that and actually figure out all the different components that you need to achieve to be able to do that. And then for each of them, you can put numbers to it. So on the sales side, we can look at leads and conversions. On the production side, you can look at, how many machines did you build today, for example, or how many parts did you put through our system today, and was expected. If it's a service type of business, how many clients did you see today? And, a lot of times we find people are working an 8-hour day, but they're only billing 4 hours of it. Well,
Yeah.
you can't afford to run a business on 50% operational efficiency unless you've got super high margins. And we don't always know how to track that.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely true. I mean, to me, that's one of the big areas that the average business owner, not being maybe a math focused person, not having the time. I mean, let's be frank, like running a business, you're going in 100 different directions, you're running full speed. There's no way that you can possibly stop down and say, you know what, this isn't my strength, these numbers, but I'm going to get in the weeds here and kind of figure out how to make this all make sense to my team. What we advocate is, exactly to your point, like I like to start with a productivity metric that the whole team can agree on, and build a dashboard around that, because I can get that to be much more in the moment for the average employee than 45-day-old financials. And so if I build that and we have a way to track like how productive we were, then kind of to your point, if you want a profitable company, you cannot be at 50% operational efficiency, exactly like you said. So at some point, at 80, at 85, at 90, this business becomes really good and really profitable. And the crazy part is I don't have to show the employees the numbers. If I teach them to win this operational efficiency game, I know the numbers on the financials will take care of themselves.
They will. The whole thing, again, coming back to that horrible math class, the whole thing turns into a math equation. And when you know how to do the math and you can get the inputs for the math, you'll see where the problem is really, really quickly. You're like, oh, there it is. If we fix that, everything flows. And that's why I'm a big fan of EOS. I think it creates those systems and processes. It creates metrics and simple dashboards for the entire business. But what I have found with EOS is they don't have a good financial dashboard component to it. And that's why I think people like you and I are a perfect match to kind of sit in there and create that missing piece of the puzzle. Now, you use EOS in your businesses, right?
We do, absolutely. We've got one that we have a professional implementer, and the other ones are self-implemented kind of at various levels.
And how has that helped your business?
Well, to your point, I tell people that EOS, The experience for the entrepreneur is amazing because you finally have this peace of mind once it's working that other people are bought in. But EOS is really for everybody else. EOS is to get the kind of special brand of crazy that most of us visionaries are and put it in a little bit of a box and say, hey, that's great, but we're going to be over here getting the work done. You kind of do your thing, and let's not let you interfere with the structure required to run a clean business, right? And so the structure might be structure of communication, structure of meetings, structure of roles. That's what EOS just is great. And look, I know you got a ton of books. I've got a ton of books. You and I have talked about books. Like, there are elements of better systems out there. The reason EOS is winning is because it is stripped down, it is simplified, and it's made digestible for the team. The team has to buy in, like a level or two away from the owner. If EOS is understood there, then the company is really run on EOS. And if it's just the owner and like their integrator, the only two talking about it, it's not really real yet.
I find a lot of business owners struggle, though, with the concept of putting the work in to build it and to define it and to look at, do I have the right people in the right seats with the right pay plans and the right incentives? And are we actually measuring the right things? Because more often than not, I think we set a metric and the metric has an unintended consequence. And so you'll get what you ask for. You have to be very careful about what you ask for. What have you noticed as you've implemented it in your business?
Well, no, I love that point. And, I might not make a lot of friends with any of the listeners who don't want to hear this little dose of medicine. But this, I keep it real, man. I've messed up business. I've screwed it up every different way you can possibly do it over my years. I've made every mistake there is to make. The reality is, a lot of us entrepreneurs, a lot of visionaries, people who would identify as a visionary, they believe that because they're so bought in on the company, they're working so hard, they're so committed, that they get to be the exception to every rule, right? It's like, I want everybody else to follow structure, but I get to go over here and do it my way because I'm the, this special brand of genius that makes this all possible. And so to your point, like, if they don't have the maturity, if they don't have, and I mean that in a business career sense, if we're not evolved to the point where they realize that, I think, I forget it's like a Jocko quote, but he says, discipline is the path to all freedom, or something like that. Freedom comes from discipline, right? Freedom comes from structure. You want to be free. You want to be free from your business. Submit to the structure that's required to run a real business, and you'll get what you want. And so many entrepreneurs try to put me first when it comes to, yeah, but I'm not going to go through that. I'm not going to sit through these meetings. I'm not going to. And then the whole team doesn't buy in, and the whole thing's a sham.
And actually, even though you keep saying all these meetings, the meetings are quick and easy and fast, and they're all rated. Like, is this a good meeting or a bad meeting? And did we hit our objectives or didn't we? Now I can go play and make a mess over on this side because you've got your basis down. And I think that's a big part of it.
Absolutely.
You've created some playbooks for your clients. What are some of the top tactics or top areas that you look at in those playbooks?
So, one, we try to really simplify the P&L. I've got a 5-category P&L that I'm a big believer in. We just call it the simple profit formula. I always say, when I got really good at running my first company was when I could explain how it made money on the back of a napkin. Right. And so it doesn't have to be super complicated. I think people get these 2- and 3-page P&Ls. And then if you're not a math person, you get lost. I get hung up on, like, what's that one little number right there? And that shouldn't be there. What is that? And meanwhile, I'm missing the whole picture. Right. So we like to look at this very simplified, common sized, meaning looking at it by percentage. What percentage is sales and marketing? What percentage is my cost of goods or cost of service? Percentage of labor, percentage of remaining overhead. And by doing that, it gives me kind of a check engine light to say, look, I know what percentages need to be where they're supposed to be based on my budget. And oh, by the way, I know you're a big fan of this. I've got a healthy percentage at the bottom in profit. So we reverse engineer what budget we can afford in those other categories based on the mandatory profit. And then it gives me just kind of a quick, check engine light on which part of the business is not performing. And therefore I dive deeper. And so when we're talking EOS and dashboards and, their scorecard and all of that, it's like we have to have that type of view at all times. We've got our high level check engine light, and then we got lower department levels where when the check engine light goes off, we dig deeper and we already have the metrics ready to review there.
And that makes a lot of sense. I think we get in the weeds too much, and you don't need to be in the weeds. If everything is running green, so be it. If there's something, then you take the time to kind of dig in, and you don't get stuck in all of those weeds. And yeah, we do this similar thing. We take the big complicated P&Ls, and what we do is we create a custom dashboard that looks at what are the 4, 5, 6 drivers for this particular business, the way they run it.
Yep.
And those are the things that we're always looking at. And then, of course, we have targets to measure those against. Like, hey, marketing and sales was supposed to be X, where was it? Or cost of goods is supposed to be Y, where was it? And are we at target, off target? And then from there, we can play all kinds of what if games. Well, what if we're going to make a change? We can look at 4 or 5 of those variables and change them and say, you know what? This change is going to make the biggest impact. So why don't we focus our efforts there to making that one, and let's ignore the others, because as you said, you're busy, you're running around, you don't have the ability to kind of do it all the time, and you have to be focused, and it takes time for people to implement change. You can't cause ripples throughout the entire business, right?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's, a huge way we like to describe it is I like to say, hey, we're just building a better mirror to hold up to your face. And a lot of times, like we described earlier, where you've got maybe part of your business looks like cash and part looks like accrual. It's like you're looking in a funhouse mirror all the time. Try putting on your makeup if you're a woman in a funhouse mirror, right? It's not going to look good when we're done. So, that's kind of the reality of how people are living. And to your point, I mean, it's really what we're trying to do. And maybe this is a weird characterization, but it's like if the 5% of the class who perked up when the quiz came out, if they were responsible for the results of the whole class, and they basically said, okay, guys, hey, we're going to figure out how to work our way through this in a way that makes sense to you. And we're going to make sure that we structure, we still need to end up with the right answers, but we're allowed to structure the test and work our way through it with you. That's basically what guys like you and guys like I do, right? Is we are, at the end of the day, you need the right answers. You need to understand what the answers say. And then you can run a really nice business based on that without ever becoming a finance expert, without ever loving math. We could still get you there.
Well, and that's why I like EOS, because EOS gives everyone a number for them to hit for their goal. And at the end of the day, they don't need to know math to know that, if I'm a service tech and I'm expected to make 7 visits a day, I can look at my thing. Did I make 7 visits today? Yes or no? Thumbs up, thumbs down. It's pretty simple. Yep. And if I didn't, then the question is, well, was I too slow, or did they not give me 7 calls, or, did something go wrong in the process that I needed help?
That is the beauty. And I think, we talk about, I love working with EOS companies because there's a level of maturity, like a company that's actually implemented EOS, at least in earnest, right? Not the guy who thinks that's the rule for everybody else. But part of what I love about EOS is that level of maturity. Part of what that says is that the company is starting to evolve its thinking around things like numbers and tracking and metrics like you described. What's amazing is we're going to have metrics that missed, or, one guy whose numbers aren't good that day. What's critical is what is the response to that? Is it beat up on the guy? That's an immature response. Or is it asking and having the guy be able to ask, like, why didn't this work today? What went wrong? Because that becomes the raw material to fixing the things in the company that ultimately make us better.
And that's true. And I think the other thing is, let's just say you have 10 service techs. You now can see who's good and who's phenomenal. And now you can take that one person and say, look, what are they doing different than everybody else? Right?
Yep.
Why are they able to do 12 calls a day and everyone else is struggling at 6 or 7? What are they doing differently? And how do we take best practices from there and roll it out to the other people to help them improve?
Yeah, I love that. And that's so one thing I'll add, that we do in terms of our playbook that I'm a huge fan of is what we call the critical unit. And it's basically a unit of measure, right? It's finding out what the right unit of measure. So in some businesses, it's like a billable hour. If you're like in my cabinet company, it's a number of cabinets. Where I think people struggle with that is we use it in the operation side of the business, and then we kind of just let it die out. And we're not pushing it far enough into the way we look at sales and marketing. So it's not a pipeline in dollars anymore. It's a pipeline in critical units. And then likewise, I mean, exactly to your point, if we want to look at our service techs, it's like if we have this critical unit to look at them by, and it may be number of service calls, or it may be minutes, it may be like the service call minutes or whatever. We want to get it down to as small of a unit that we can reasonably count on as possible. And then we look at profitability in those terms. We look at productivity in those terms. We look at how much of their time is kind of that operational efficiency in those terms. It becomes an amazing way to look at the business. And what's great about it, kind of like percentages, when we're looking at common size percentages on the P&L, you looking at this unit of measure is scalable. So 5 years from now, as long as we haven't changed industries, regardless of where our numbers go up or down from here, regardless of what happens with inflation and whatever, I'll be able to look at that unit of measure compared to now and see how many units of measure per employee did we get done. Mm-hmm. And so being able to see that over time is life-changing. And that unit of measure is kind of the story of the business. Everybody knows like, oh, we got a bunch of service calls today. So you don't have to teach someone a new language to be able to use it. You just kind of define it and start giving them related metrics to stack on top of it.
Nice. You've also participated in Strategic Coach.
I have, yeah.
How is that helpful for you?
Well, I love, there's so many different coaching and mastermind groups and different, ways you can approach just kind of bettering yourself. What I love about Strategic Coach is, number one, it is really built for the hands-off entrepreneur or the aspiring hands-off entrepreneur, meaning wherever you are in that journey of being like, I'm one man against the world. Now I've got a dedicated team. Now I'm able to delegate to my team. I'm able to take vacations and relax, to someday saying, I want to hire someone, whether they're an integrator, chief of staff, take over the day-to-day. Now, you know what? I'm going to hire a CEO and I'm just going to own my company. Wherever you are on that path, that's kind of the path that Strategic Coach really pushes. And it's not them telling you there's a right answer. It's them basically saying, build a company the way you want it, but like be open and honest about what your real dream here is. And so you can walk into Strategic Coach, you're doing a breakout session with one of the other entrepreneurs, and you could say like, hey, my goal is next year, I'm going to start a company and I'm never going to work there a day. And they just go, okay, cool. How are you going to do it? And in a lot of circles, they'll get so hung up on like, well, I've had people tell me you can't hire a CEO and not work there every day. I now have multiple CEOs in companies that I own. But years ago when I was trying to do it, it wasn't as common of a concept. And I've had trusted CEO, owner, operators that I know and trust and like tell me to my face I couldn't do that. So you walk into a room where that sort of thing is just kind of expected. And it really is, it forces you to think bigger about what you're trying to accomplish.
And I know Dan Sullivan, well, technically, he didn't write the book. He had someone write it for him. Who Not How.
Yep.
And that is essentially that underlying concept of who can do this for me, not how can I do this, and learning to step out and be able to do that. Dan's phenomenal at thinking that way and learning to kind of dictate and find the right people and then get out of the way and let it run. And if you think about it, every large corporation is run that way. And there's no
Absolutely.
reason you can't take that principle and bring it down to your small company.
I love that. I want to mention something based on that. I think, and I got stuck in this trap for far too long as a small business owner, thinking that what works in big companies is somehow irrelevant to you. Nothing could be further from the truth. The reality is no medium or large business hasn't figured out their money. No medium or large business hasn't figured out their marketing channels and how to monetize them, right? How to drive the metrics that matter within their business, how to delegate the right tasks to the right people. I mean, all the things we've been talking about today. And so I don't want to be in a big business. That's not my goal. But I shouldn't throw out the baby with the bathwater, because to your point, this journey we're on is really about, as we figure out those topics, the business becomes a business we really dream of. And we get out of being stuck in this. Well, I just have to, and for now I'm going to, and I don't want to, but I guess I'm going to X, Y, or Z. Like, getting out of that mode only happens at the speed we're able to solve those challenges.
So true. Is there anything we should have chatted about but didn't get a chance to?
Oh, I think it's great. You and I could go forever, but I mean, I think this is a lot of good topics we've covered.
Cool. If people would like to learn more about you and your organization, how can they do that?
Yeah, they can look me up, finelevate.com, and I'm sure that'll be in the show notes. And then, also look me up on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. And really just love connecting with entrepreneurs. So my other businesses are much more selling into corporate kind of enterprise level environments. And so I have been loving being in an industry that's really working directly with entrepreneurs. Whether I end up selling to them or having them as a client or not, that's not the important part to me. I just love, I've been in a ton of mastermind groups and stuff like Strategic Coach. So I love connecting with people. And if somebody wants to connect, I love talking business. So
awesome. We'll put that all in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to this unedited video of the Profit Answer Man podcast. If you'd like to catch the full episode and learn more about what we do, check us out at profitcomesfirst.com. We also go through the Profit First book in each and every chapter in the beginning episodes of the podcast, so check those out as well. Thanks for listening, and here's to you having a more profitable and growing business.